The betrayal didn't whisper, it roared across the banquet hall the moment I lifted the silver-lidded shrimp. Piled high on a platter, glistening under the golden lights. The thermometer in my hand blinked, 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm seafood. Death waiting in disguise, and then came the voice, sharp, cutting through the hum of violins and champagne chatter. "Don't you dare make a scene," my father hissed, fingers digging into my arm. "You will not embarrass this family tonight. My name is Claire. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? Like your voice, your truth, was nothing but noise to be silenced?" That was my reality, standing in a $200,000 wedding hall, surrounded by glittering chandeliers, marble floors, and 200 guests who thought they were about to enjoy a perfect evening. They didn't know they were about to eat poison. I wanted to scream. To grab the microphone from the DJ and shout, "Don't touch the shrimp. Don't eat the seafood. You'll regret it," but my father's grip tightened. His face was cold, practiced. The patriarch who had spent years polishing his reputation like silverware. Who valued appearances more than truth. "You're not ruining this night," he whispered, and just like that. I saw it, his betrayal wasn't just about tonight. It was about every moment he had chosen pride over me. Over my mother. Over what was right. The clinking of champagne glasses filled the silence. A waiter carried another tray of shrimp toward the tables. My stomach turned. I had two choices. Stay quiet and watch disaster unfold, or defy my father and risk being cast out forever. The decision carved itself into me like stone. I moved fast. Quiet. Efficient. Every platter I touched, I lifted, carried, and vanished with. Guests barely noticed. A smile here, a nod there. I was invisible, blending into the chaos of the celebration, but my father noticed. His eyes followed me, dark and furious, as if I had lit a match in a room full of gasoline, and yet, I kept going. By the time the speeches began, I had cleared every shrimp from the hall. Trays hidden in the kitchen. Bins filled, lids slammed shut. My hands shook, but my face never cracked. I thought I was saving strangers. I didn't know I was saving myself, too, because when the doctor approached later, an older man with a silver beard, eyes heavy with knowing, he leaned close and whispered, "Whoever removed that shrimp, they saved lives tonight. Do you understand? They prevented a massacre." The room spun. I heard the applause for the bride's father, the laughter at the toast, the tinkling of forks against crystal. Nobody knew what had almost happened, but my father did. He knew, and his stare across the table said everything. "You chose them over me. You humiliated this family. You humiliated me." What he didn't understand was this: his definition of family had never included me, and that was the first night I realized I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was his enemy. The chandeliers glowed like fire above us, casting long shadows across the dance floor. I sat there, the ghost of shrimp still clinging to my fingers. And I thought, if saving lives means betraying you, then let me betray you 1,000 times over. The wedding ended in glitter and applause. But the ride home was a funeral. My father didn't speak until the door slammed shut behind us. The limo smelled of roses and spilled champagne. His hand curled into a fist on the leather seat. "You made me look like a fool tonight," he said. I didn't flinch. "I saved people's lives." His laugh was hollow, sharp. "No one was dying. You just wanted attention. You embarrassed this family in front of everyone. Do you even understand the damage you caused?" I stared at him, at the man who taught me to hold my shoulders back, to smile for photos, to never let anyone see a crack. He didn't see me as a daughter. I was a prop. A reflection. And tonight, I had shattered that reflection. "Damage?" I whispered. "The only damage tonight was in that shrimp. You wanted me to let 200 people get sick, just to save your image." He leaned in close, his breath hot, his eyes burning. "Yes. Because image is everything. And you'll never understand that." My chest tightened. In that moment, I understood something I had been denying my whole life. My father didn't love me. He loved control. He loved silence. He loved the illusion of perfection. The silence stretched until the city lights blurred past the windows. Then his words fell like a verdict: "You're no daughter of mine." The next morning, the phone calls started. My aunt. My cousins. My own mother. "Claire, why would you do that? You ruined the reception." Your father is humiliated. Do you know how much this wedding cost? Not one word about the food. Not one thank you. Not one acknowledgement that I had prevented something catastrophic. To them, I wasn't a savior. I was a scandal. By the end of the week, I was uninvited from Thanksgiving. Then Christmas. Then every gathering after. My cousins posted photos online, smiling in group shots, captions dripping with words like family forever. My name never tagged. My face never there. I had been erased, but there was one person who couldn't erase me, the doctor. He called me 3 days later. His voice was calm but heavy. You don't know me, Claire. But I know what you did. I tested the leftovers. The shrimp was contaminated, dangerously so. If it had been served, people would have ended up in the hospital. Some may not have survived. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. You were right, he said softly. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. When I hung up, tears burned my eyes, not from sorrow, but from clarity. I hadn't just saved strangers. I had exposed the rot in my own family. That night, I scrolled through photos of the wedding on social media. The bride and groom beaming. Guests dancing, champagne flowing, tables glistening with food. Except for one thing, no shrimp. Nobody knew why. Nobody noticed what had been taken away, and yet, in every photo, I saw the shadow of it. The absence of disaster. The secret that only I carried. My father thought he had silenced me. But what he didn't realize was this: silence isn't the same as surrender. I would stay quiet, yes. I would let him believe he had won, but inside me, something was hardening, because when a family decides you're a traitor for telling the truth, sometimes the only way to survive is to become exactly what they fear. The shrimp was gone. But the poison in my family? That was just beginning to spread. Exile tastes different when it's served by your own blood. By spring, I had become a ghost in my family's world. No invitations. No calls. No seat at the table. I was the story whispered at dinners, the name spoken with a shake of the head. She ruined the wedding. She embarrassed us. She thinks she knows better than everyone. They cut me off clean. Like trimming a thread that didn't match their fabric, but ghosts see everything. I still followed them online, every brunch photo, every vacation, every curated smile. My father was louder than ever, his business thriving, his reputation untarnished. The same man who would have let 200 people fall sick was being praised as a pillar of the community. It burned, and then came the irony. His company began catering weddings, food, events. The very thing he scolded me for interfering in. He posted photos of grand halls filled with plates of seafood, smiling as though he had invented safety and abundance. His caption: "Trust us to make your special day perfect." Perfect. I remembered the thermometer in my hand. 52 degrees Fahrenheit. The smell of salt and death disguised as celebration. That was when the idea first bloomed in me, not wild, not reckless, but quiet. A seed planted in silence. Revenge, not the childish kind. Not throwing insults online or begging to be heard. No, I wanted something cleaner. Something colder. I wanted the truth to bleed through their perfection. So I started small. I left anonymous reviews. Detailed, clinical, about unsafe handling practices I had seen with my own eyes. The staff leaving trays in the heat too long. Fish stored without proper ice. Shrimp glistening suspiciously. I wrote them as though I were a guest. A bride. A concerned parent, and soon, I wasn't the only one. Other voices began to appear, real ones. Couples who had ordered food and noticed it sitting out too long. Guests who felt sick after a rehearsal dinner. Whispers that maybe my father's empire wasn't as flawless as it appeared. He fought back, of course. My father always fought. Deleted comments. Hired PR to scrub reviews. Smiled wider in photos, clinked glasses with more force, but cracks don't vanish just because you paint over them. The seed was growing. One night, I got a message from a woman I didn't know. She had stumbled on one of my anonymous posts. Are you the one who exposed the seafood at the wedding? She wrote. My chest tightened. I hesitated. Then typed back, yes. Her reply came fast. You saved my mother. She has a shellfish allergy. She didn't eat that night, but if she had, she might not be here. I just wanted to say thank you. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Gratitude from a stranger, when my own family couldn't spare a single word. That's when I knew, revenge wasn't about payback. It was about balance. About truth finding its way into the light. No matter how much they tried to bury it, the silence they forced on me had turned into my weapon. My father thought he could erase me. What he didn't realize was that erasure leaves space, and I was filling that space with whispers that were becoming a storm. One day soon, that storm would break over his empire, and when it did, the family that cast me out would finally taste what I had tasted for months: bitterness on their tongue, poison in their veins, the kind that doesn't kill you, but makes you wish it had. They taught me to keep my mouth shut, but they never taught me how to be invisible with purpose. After the anonymous posts and the quiet complaints, the next step was method. I stopped writing from the edges and started standing in the center, behind a clipboard, a borrowed lab coat. A face that no one recognized because it wasn't supposed to belong to anyone they knew. I rented a tiny office under a different name, Claire Hollis Consulting. It felt ridiculous and electric. I wasn't a consultant. I was a witness. But names can be weapons when people expect authority from paper. I hired a food safety analyst, cheap, competent, hungry for a byline. He was a man named Jacob who smelled faintly of coffee and failure, which made him perfect. We tested samples, documented temperatures, photographed storage rooms with the kind of patience only the truly pissed off possess. We timed staff breaks, logged delivery schedules, and mapped every banquet manager who had ever smiled for my father's camera. Evidence is a slow animal. It takes time to trap. You feed it facts and you wait for it to corner someone. We found things that made my stomach drop. Little horrors: trays left unrefrigerated in middle service. Ice replenished by volume, not temperature. Shrimp thawed on counters because it was faster. The company's internal memos, saved by a careless manager, talked about cost-cutting, cheaper suppliers. Shortcuts passed off as efficiency. All the things my father would have called business decisions. All the things that could have killed people armed with that. I did the thing my father least expected. I aimed for the parts of him that weren't polished: his partnerships, contracts, permits, and the city health board. I started calling restaurants, venue managers, anyone who might have a scar from dealing with his company. Some were too afraid to speak. Some offered thin apologies and worse, confidentiality agreements. But a few, 2, then 3, gave me names and true stories. A rehearsal dinner where 12 guests got food poisoning. A corporate lunch where people missed work for days. These were whispers that had been smothered with settlement checks and NDAs. I collected the whispers like pennies, every small cost of truth. My father smelled the wind shift before he saw the storm. He hired lawyers. He called the analyst a fraud. He held more ribbon cuttings, gave another interview about how customer safety is our utmost priority, and smiled so wide it looked surgical. He tried the old playbook: deny, distract, donate. I kept my face private. Jacob and I sent dossiers to the health department, to local news producers, to the one independent reporter who still liked asking old men sharp questions. We sent photographs of empty ice chests sitting in humid storage, temperature logs with numbers that didn't lie, and the memos with his name on them, his handwriting on invoices, signatures on delivery manifests. The first article hit like a stone in a pond. It was small, a weekend piece on a local site, but it named the company and quoted an anonymous, concerned employee. The comments were predictable: outrage, denial, those who still believed the polished myth. But then a bigger station picked it up. Then anchors asked the health department questions they hadn't thought to answer. The board opened an inquiry. My father called that night. He didn't scream. He didn't try to charm me. He was a man who knew how high the stakes were and felt the ground tilt. You started this, he said, voice flat. You could end careers. You could ruin people. You already have, I said. You ruined my life. He laughed, bitter, incredulous. You think exposing me makes you whole? You think the world will hug you for tearing down your family's name? No, I said. I think the world will stop getting sick. That silence between us held the exact weight of everything we'd lost. I wasn't asking for his blessing. I didn't want it. I wanted the truth to land like a verdict. The inquiry grew. Inspections were scheduled. Vendors were subpoenaed. My father's boardroom, once a theater of applause, became a place of nervous faces and whispered defenses, and somewhere in the middle of the chaos, a small, private cruelty found me. my mother's number stopped going straight to voicemail. She would listen and hang up if she heard my voice. Once, when I left a message, short, factual, she called me back at dawn. Her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "Claire," she whispered. "Your father says you're tearing this family apart." "Mom," I said, "they almost killed people. I couldn't let that happen." There was a long inhale on the other end. The voice I loved, split in two by fear and loyalty. "We promised to protect the image?" I finished. "We promised to lie?" She didn't answer. The line clicked out. I realized then that justice wasn't only about evidence. It was a clean, cruel mirror held up to everyone who had learned to smile while lying. The mirror would force them to choose, step away from the lie, or keep polishing it until it cut them. As inspectors arrived and cameras circled, my father paced behind his desk like a man watching his empire burn in a slow, unbearable film. He kept saying the same thing to anyone who would listen: "She's ungrateful. She's a liar," but the paper trail hummed under it all like a low, inevitable song. In the quiet after another long day, I sat on my apartment floor with the dossiers spread around me. The city lights blinked, indifferent and honest. I thought of the people who had called to thank me, strangers who became my only family, and of all the small ways the world had taught me to survive. The wave was building. I could feel its pull at my ankles. When it finally broke, it would not be gentle, and for the first time since the shrimp, I did not fear the water. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came in the form of paper, official letters nailed to doors, notices stamped with seals, and headlines inked in black. City Health Board suspends license of elderson catering. That was my father's name in print. Bold. Unforgiving. The article didn't mention me. It didn't have to. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation. Photos of food left to sweat under dim kitchen lights. Temperature logs falsified in handwriting that inspectors confirmed as his. Internal memos quoting cost-saving measures that violated basic safety law. The words, "gross negligence," were printed 3 times. By noon, vendors pulled their contracts. By nightfall, his investors were already whispering about pulling out, but the real spectacle wasn't the news. It was the silence at our family's Sunday dinner table, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one missing. They were. The long oak table at my aunt's house sat bare, empty chairs around it. No laughter, no glasses clinking, no carefully plated roasts. They had cancelled. No dinner, no gathering, no performance of unity. When a family exists only to be admired, scandal is a kind of famine. And famine makes people scatter. My phone lit up with cousins who had ignored me for months. Their messages dripped with desperation, not affection. "Claire, what the hell did you do? Do you realize you've destroyed everything? Fix this. Please. You can't let him go down like this." I read every word. Then I powered the phone off. The truth was, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, like the justice I had chased had left me a shell. Because revenge isn't sweet, it's a slow burn that scorches even the one holding the match. But then, one message changed everything. It was the bride. My cousin. The one whose wedding had started it all. She wrote only one line: "Claire? Were the rumors true about the shrimp?" I stared at the screen, breath caught in my throat. Nobody in my family had ever dared ask me that before. I typed back, "Yes." Her reply came minutes later. "Then you saved me too." The words cracked something inside me, an old wound I had been carrying like armor. She knew. Maybe not the whole story, maybe not the scale of the betrayal, but enough to make her question the silence that had buried me. And for the first time since that night, I felt less like a ghost. But my father? He was unraveling. I saw it on the evening news, his press conference, staged with trembling hands. He stood behind a podium, his voice too smooth, his smile too tight. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "An attack on my reputation. My company has served thousands without incident. We are victims of a smear campaign." But the cameras didn't believe him. The city didn't believe him, and when the reporter asked, "Sir, are you aware of allegations that your own daughter exposed these violations?" His mask cracked. The pause was small, but fatal. He recovered with a shake of his head, a dismissive laugh, but the footage spread online. Viewers replayed that pause over and over. They saw what I had always seen: the pride, the rage, the man who could never accept the truth if it came from me. I thought about calling him. About saying, "This could have been avoided if you'd just listened," but then I remembered his words in the limo, dripping like venom, "You're no daughter of mine." So I didn't call. I didn't explain. I let him sit in the silence he had built, and as the city feasted on the scandal, I thought of something the doctor once told me: truth always leaves a mark, Claire. Sometimes it looks like a scar. Sometimes it looks like salvation. In my father's world, scars were shameful. In mine, they were proof of survival. The shrimp had been warm that night. But now, finally, my father was the one sweating, and this was only the beginning of his hunger. The courtroom smelled like lemon disinfectant and old money, sterile, antiseptic, and desperate to pretend this was just business. Suits filed in like predators. Cameras took their seats like vultures. My father arrived with a face reheated for public consumption, apologetic, confused, enraged beneath the surface. He sat at the table with his legal team, the same men who'd taught him how to bury mistakes for a price. I watched from the gallery, hands folded, heart a metronome of purpose. This was bigger than him now. It was a ledger of every cut corner, every shortcut that pretended to be efficiency and nearly killed people. It was a tally of consequences finally being counted. The district attorney walked through the evidence I had helped compile: temperature logs, invoices, memos with his signature, videos of trays left in the open. Each piece landed with a sound like a gavel striking an unseen verdict. The prosecution painted a picture of prioritizing profit over people, of a man who turned celebration into risk. My father's defense tried to make it small. A mistake, they said. An oversight. Blame the vendors, blame the staff, blame anyone but the man whose handwriting signed the falsified logs. They called witnesses who testified under oath that quality controls existed, until the documents told another story. When my father took the stand, he looked smaller than he had at any banquet, any photo shoot. Without the chandeliers or applause, his armor had no place to shine. He answered questions in clipped sentences, the same voice he used to charm sponsors. But under oath, charm phrase fast. "You knew of cost-cutting measures?" The prosecutor asked. "We made business decisions. Did you sign these logs?" His fingers trembled just enough to betray him. That pause was a fissure. Outside the courtroom, the news vans multiplied like weeds. Investors who had once called him visionary called back to ask for meetings. Vendors who had been silenced by NDAs now filed claims. Contracts were suspended. The company's accounts were frozen. Elder Son Catering, once a cash machine of weddings and corporate galas, went from empire to shell in the span of weeks. People who had laughed at me at family dinners now watched their bank accounts dwindle in real time. The man who had taught me the price of image now paid a different kind of cost: numbers on a balance sheet, letters from creditors, the slow, humiliating erosion of power. But what fascinated me wasn't the fall. It was the way the fall revealed what had been hidden. Emails my father had thought private showed him boasting about cutting corners. Texts revealed his contempt for anyone who questioned him. His partners had pictures of him smiling while signing off on cheaper suppliers. The veneer peeled, layer by layer. My mother called once, voice small. "Claire, the house," she started, then stopped. Her silence said more than any headline. I thought of the life we had in that house: polished silver, rehearsed laughter, a script for every social event. The walls had always been speakers for performance. Now the speakers were silent. At night I walked the city, the cold biting my cheeks, and thought about what justice looked like. It was not a trophy. It was not joy. It was the slow accounting of truth. For every person who had reveled in my disgrace, there was a ledger opening that would not be closed with a smile. There were moments I felt guilty, when I saw my father's hands shake during testimony, when I imagined the boardroom empty and the staff uncertain. But guilt was not mine to carry. He had taught his company to value profit above people. I taught the world to notice the cost, and the most brutal part of all, as his empire crumbled, some of them wanted me back. Cousins reached out with pleas and promises. "Help us," they texted. "Fix it." Their voices were thin and panicked. They wanted the daughter who had been disowned to now be a savior for their financial wounds. I answered none of them, because there is a difference between mercy and enabling. There is a difference between saving strangers and saving architects of danger. The rains came the week the company declared bankruptcy, heavy, clean, as if the city itself wanted to wash something away. I stood at a window and watched the sheets fall, and in the blur I saw the world we had been handed, glossy and shallow and finally cracked. When the trial closed, the jury didn't take long. Guilty on multiple counts. Fines. Probation. A name tarnished beyond repair. Not enough to heal everything, but enough to make sure the next person who thought profit trumped safety would hesitate. I left the courthouse with the papers in my hand and the weight in my chest. Justice had been done, imperfect, late, messy. But done. Outside, a woman I'd never met came up and took my hand. Her eyes were wet. "He saved my niece," she said. "You saved her." I felt something loosen inside me, an ember cooling into ash. Finally, the empire had fallen, but the people it endangered still had lives to live. Sometimes justice is about keeping them alive long enough to tell the truth, and in that moment, I understood what victory felt like, not triumph, but the quiet returning of balance. When the empire collapsed, the silence was louder than the applause had ever been. Relatives who had shunned me for months now whispered in corners, avoiding my eyes. The same cousins who'd laughed at my exile were suddenly calculating the cost of losing their inheritance. My father had built his castle on sand, and now they were choking on the dust. He avoided me, out of pride, or shame, or both. But I saw him once, outside the courthouse, shoulders bent, hair grayer than I remembered. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost, because pity is wasted on men who would let 200 guests choke on poison just to save their pride. The calls didn't stop. My mother begging me to help quiet things down. Aunt saying, "We can still recover if you just stop talking." They didn't want truth. They wanted silence, the same silence they had demanded from me in the limo that night, but I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I chose to stay silent, yes, but now my silence was sharper than any accusation. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I let the truth, already printed, already proven, devour them whole, and when the papers declared his business officially bankrupt, I didn't celebrate. I simply folded the headline, tucked it into a drawer, and breathed for once. I wasn't suffocating under his shadow. The man who warned me not to embarrass the family had destroyed it himself. The day the verdict was read, the sky was gray, heavy with rain. My father sat at the defense table, suit hanging loose on his frame, jaw clenched as if he could hold the empire together by force of will. But the judge's voice cut through him like glass. Guilty. Fraud. Negligence. Restitution in the amount of $2.3 million. Business license revoked. The words echoed through the courtroom, final and merciless. There was no gasp, no uproar. Just a collective exhale, as though the city had been holding its breath, waiting for the illusion to shatter. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply sat there, watching the man who once told me I wasn't his daughter anymore reduced to another defendant in a crumbling suit. When it ended, he glanced back at me. Not with rage, not even with hatred. Just emptiness. As though he finally realized I had been the only one willing to save him, from himself, from his pride, from the rot he called legacy. And he had thrown me away. Outside, the rain was relentless. My shoes splashed through puddles as the courthouse emptied. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but I slipped through the crowd unseen. I wasn't there for their spectacle. I was there for something quieter, because the truth was, revenge hadn't given me joy. It had given me air. Breath. Space. I had been the girl silenced in a limo, told not to embarrass her family. Now I was the woman who had saved 200 strangers, and herself. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady. It was survival. It was mine.